Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to return to Denmark and we're going to have a look at another beer from a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before, albeit it's been a very long time since I've done anything involving this brewery. The last review involving them was a collaboration beer back in about 2018, and then prior to that in 2017 was the last dedicated review that I did to this brewery. And it's a real shame because these guys were one of the first Danish breweries that I discovered when I moved over here to Scandinavia, and I always used to keep an eye out for their beers when I went over to Copenhagen and make sure that I brought at least one back every time. But gradually they just kind of disappeared from the beer shops that I was going to. So yeah, I need to figure out a way to get a hold of these beers more regularly because they have always been a really solid brewery in my opinion. So I'm glad that I can feature these guys again, let's just say that. So for this review we are going to go to the island of Bornholm, right in the middle of the Baltic Sea, the Danish island that is actually close to us here in Skåne than it is to the Danes over in Sealand. I'm not sure about the history of that actually, why Bornholm still belongs to Denmark but then Skåne and Blekinge transferred to Sweden. I will need to have a look and read up on the history of that a little bit. But it's supposed to be a very nice island. I do want to go and visit it sometime. But we're going to go to a little town called Tejn in the northwest of the island. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Danish pronunciation, as I've told you before, is very different from the Swedish, and it's actually very difficult to be honest with you. But Tejn, of course, is home to beer here. And so today we're going to have a look at their Ammestout. This one comes in at 6.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a milk stout brewed with coffee and molasses. So this one I think should be very interesting. At 6.5%, this is definitely one of the lower alcohol stouts that I've reviewed in recent times, and that should make for a nice change of pace. As you'll know if you've been watching the channel regularly, I'm a huge fan of coffee stouts, and a lot of that came on the back of the coffee stouts from Dugges Brewery up in Gothenburg here in Sweden. And yeah, it should be nice to try something that's a little bit lower in alcohol, a nice lower alcohol coffee stout actually. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. I think this is my 5th review involving this brewery. The very first beer I had was the Ammestout, which is a beautiful imperial brown ale, one of the best ones I've had, and I do recommend you try that beer if you get the chance. Then came the Executioner IPA, which was a lovely West Coast IPA, then the Black Hawks, which was a solid black IPA again, and then probably the quirkiest beer that I've had from these guys came after that. It was a collaboration with Okara from the Faroe Islands, and it was a Sten Porter, an imperial Sten Porter. So they put hot stones into the brew and let it caramelise actually, which was really interesting. That beer was called Rikedyr or something. It had a weird kind of elephant thing on the front of it if I remember rightly, but that was the last review involving this brewery, and I'm pretty sure that was back in like 2018 or something like that. But that is a beer that I would most definitely make sure you try if you get the chance, along with the Ammestout. Those are probably the 2 best beers that I've had involving this brewery so far, but definitely nice to have them back again, and I really hope that I can find some way to get a hold of the Beer Here beers regularly once again. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Very curious about this beer. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Beer Here before, and like I said, hopefully we can add more to that list fairly regularly in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. That is being added to very regularly because I am so close to Denmark here in Skåne. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Beer Here then, on to my brewery notes. So Beer Here started out as a gypsy brewery, and the company was founded by Christian Skovdal Andersen back in 2008, but he'd been homebrewing for over 15 years, and he previously was involved in Ulfabriken before starting up the company. By trade he was a programmer, and he and his friend Martin Larsson established Ulfabriken back in 2004 as a side business to their programming work, and it just really took off. So he left to establish Beer Here, and he states quite firmly that he doesn't like the business and the idea of having employees and things like that. So this was the main reason why he went down the route of gypsy brewing first off. But apparently his favourite hop is Nelson Sauvin because it has, you know, the American fruitiness and European spiciness. But he's also very interested in low alcohol beers as well. And a lot of the beers were initially brewed at Solgaard's Brewery, which is in Aalborg in the very northern part of Øland, the kind of mainland part of Denmark that's attached to Germany. But they also brewed quite a number of beers at the Profbrouwerij in Lochis de Heefte, just outside of Ghent in Belgium. And so Christian was also involved for a period of time in the Bierwerk project down in South Africa as well, from what I understand. But these days, as I mentioned earlier, they have their own brewery in Tejn in the northwest of Bornholm, which they opened up back in 2015, and they brew 1,500 litre batches. So they also now have the Pennelien beer brand, which focuses on sour beers and barrel aging. I'd love to try a couple of those, but again, I've not seen them before. So yeah, they have been brewing a lot of stuff over the last few years. As was November 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 185 different kinds of beer. But yeah, like I say, this is only my 5th review involving these guys. But had they been a little bit more easy for me to get a hold of, then I would have definitely reviewed more of them over the years. So yeah, I need to figure out what shop in Copenhagen stocks these beers regularly, and yeah, then hopefully we can review a few of them. I bought this one at Fisk og Brud, if I remember the name rightly, in Amager, which is a really nice beer shop, by the way. I would recommend you go and check that out. They've got some really interesting things, and they had 2 or 3 beers from Beer Here, but I wasn't sure how fresh the IPAs were, so this is the main reason why I went to this one, along with the fact that it was a coffee milk stout, actually, because I thought that would be really interesting. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Beer Here for the moment. I would love to see these guys open up like their own tap room or something in Copenhagen, but you know, if Christian doesn't really like the business side of things, then I'm not sure that will happen. But as I say, I do want to go and visit Bornholm at some point, and hopefully if we do that, we could get Christian on the channel and do like a sort of meet the brewery kind of thing with him. Actually, that would be awesome to have him on for an interview. So we'll see about doing that in the future. As I say, my father and I have got a few plans to travel around in Scandinavia a little bit more. So when we're doing that, we will see about doing some interviews and things with the different brewery people. So yeah, really curious to see. I would really be curious to go and visit Bornholm. I've heard it's very, very pretty, and it would be quite cool to go and meet Christian Eriksson as well. So yeah, and Christian Andersen, sorry, Christian Skovda Andersen. So yeah, this one I think should be a really, really interesting beer. And as I say, it's just a shame. I'm just a bit sad that I can't get a hold of the Beer Here beers so regularly anymore. But hey ho. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Beer Here for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one. So as you can see, there is a nursing mother on the front of the label there. I'm guessing that this beer probably would never make it into Sweden because it's got children on the label, and you know, Systembolaget have really very strict rules about that. But the name actually means like the nursing stout, as in like the nursing mother. So yeah, it tells you a little bit of a story on the back of the beer here, so I'll just let the camera kind of focus on that a little bit, but I will try to translate this for you. So it says in the 1800s in England, people used to brew an extra crafty and nourishing stout for nursing mothers. So Beer Here is since Beer Here is dedicated to the care of the young, we are going to do the same. So serious about the care for the young, we are going to do the same. So this one, in this beer we have used milk sugar, which is I think it's the same, which is traditional, and we've also used a nice coffee. Coffee, I'm not sure exactly what that would be, and then we've also put to give it, it's saying we've used a nice coffee in here to give a refreshing and uplifting caffeine dose to Vognenator. So yeah, it's basically saying, yeah, it gives like a kind of refreshing caffeine boost, if you like. Some of the words in Danish, as I say, are a little bit different from from Swedish, but there are a few that just are not in my vocabulary yet. Still studying my Swedish, of course. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a lot better by next June when I finish the course that I'm on just now. But yeah, I think I did okay with that. I did okay. But yeah, as you can see, a plain bottle cap on this one. It would be cool if they did put this, like that kind of symbol on the top of it. It would be nice if they had the personalised bottle caps, but I think that would be quite expensive actually. But it says that this one is best before the 14th of January 2023, so that means it will be you know, it's quite interesting that you can age a 6.5% stout for that long actually. But yeah, as I mentioned to you earlier, 6.5% milk stout brewed with coffee and molasses. So yeah, this should be very interesting. And this, from what I understand, is a spring release beer. It was a spring release beer in 2020. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Yeah. So as you can see, a nice little bit of smoke on the opening there as we get the beer out, and we'll stick it in the glass. Yeah, this, I have to say, does look very nice, and I'm getting some really nice aromas off this as we pour it. Let's just sugar the last little bit up and fire it in. There we go. That, I have to say, is a pretty nice pour. No sediment, well, virtually no sediment left in the bottom of the bottle there. But yeah, it certainly looks the part of a coffee stout. As I've told you before, I love coffee stouts. Coffee beans are an awesome adjunct to add into beers because they've just got such a diversity about them. You know, it's all about the metres above sea level at which the coffee is grown. If you grow them higher, you get more fruity aromas and citrusy flavours and all of these kind of things. The mazel is what you're looking for, the metres above sea level. Different coffees grown in different places are going to have that, different minerals in the water, different minerals in the soil, and all of these kind of things. You know, coffee beans are like hops, so much variety in there. But yeah, as you could see when we poured this beer, it had just about a finger of a frothy, I would say very kind of light mocha coloured head, to be honest with you. The more bumpy parts of that have faded away now, and it's just a nice kind of foamy thing there, but I think that is going to quite quickly fade away and just leave a nice foamy ring around the edge of the glass there. I can start to see the surface of the liquid underneath, but yeah, certainly looks the part. But I think it's fair to say that this one is a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. You do get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi Max kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to this one, I would say. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, there's nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then and just see how we get on with this beer. I'm really curious about this, like I said. Oh, that does smell very nice. It does smell very good. It's really interesting because it actually smells, it's got a real balance of things. You get all three of the things that you would kind of want out of the beer. You get the coffee beans, you get a good little bit of fruitiness out of it, and you also get a real kind of, almost, it does, in a way it reminds me of the Stenport a little bit, that kind of really smooth brown sugary note that the beer has. That is really kind of quirky. I did not expect that from this beer, but I suppose at 6.5%, you know, you're going to have a lower malt content in this one, so maybe lower alcohol coffee stouts are going to, you know, let the hoppy characteristics come out a little bit more and give you a bit more of a fruity note. Maybe as well they're going to let the coffee beans dominate the aroma a little bit more, and coffee can have incredibly fruity characteristics to it. So yeah, a few things to think about with this review actually. So obviously a lower malt content means that your focus is going to be a little bit less on the you know, the brown sugars and the dark malts and stuff like that, and a little bit more on the adjuncts and things that they've got in this one. But I will say it's got a lovely aroma to it. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, you can smell a little bit of that roasty toasty black malt in there. I do wonder, just going from the aroma, if this has Carafa in it, because Carafa, of course, is a malt type that was trademarked by the Weirmann maltery in Bamberg in Franconia, northern Bavaria in Germany, and it just, to me, it's always come across as really distinctive, and I have to say, without blowing my own horn, I think I'm fairly good at detecting the Carafa. So I've just got a feeling that this beer has a little bit of Carafa in it, and the way I think that you can tell that is that it has, I'll say this and I'll be wrong now, that's always sod's law, you know, but you always get, with Carafa, you always get this lovely roasty toasty well fired bread crust element, but at the same time it's got a really awesome smoothness to it, and that's what I'm getting as the backbone of the beer here. You know, I'm really getting that kind of well-fired, bread crusty but still quite smooth backbone. There is an element of that sort of German brown rye bread in here as well. You can really get that in here, but the coffee beans I think really blend in with that very well. The coffee beans just give you a little bit more of that smoothness. But yeah, for me, I'm pretty sure the backbone in this beer has a bit of carafa in it. So yeah, let's have a little look at the coffee and the brown sugar part of this beer. Now let's focus on that a wee bit. So yeah, the coffee beans for me actually come across as being very, very smooth and quite earthy, to be honest with you. That's an interesting thing. I think, again, I'm not sure. I would guess that when you go up to make an imperial coffee stout, you would put more coffee beans in the beer. So for me, the coffee beans in this one, they're not sort of punching their way out, if you like. They are just adding like another dimension, if that makes sense. They don't try and punch their way out of this one. But the coffee in this one, for me, comes across as a really nice, smooth and quite sort of earthy roast, actually. It comes across very, very nicely, to be honest with you, in that sense. And the lactose that's obviously in here, the milk sugar, as they were calling it on the label, that really smoothens out the coffee a little bit. So maybe that's what's making the coffee come across as very smooth and very kind of mocha-like. So I really like how that side of this beer, kind of goes together, to be honest with you. So yeah, the coffee side of this beer, it's a really nice smooth earthy roast. When you sugar the beer up a wee bit, you start to get a few kind of red fruity notes, I think, out of the coffee beans as well, and you do get that from the hoppy side of it too. So yeah, quite a smooth earthy coffee, but just with a little bit of as I say, just with a little bit of red fruit character coming out of it in my mind. So I really like how that side of the beer goes together. The lactosey notes, as I say, kind of smoothen it out a bit, but then you also get those kind of brown sugary notes out of this one. It comes across, the brown sugars that you get in this one are almost the same as like a, you know, could this beer smell a little bit like a caramel latte? I actually don't drink coffee at all. I just never really drink coffee, but I'm wondering if this beer could smell like a caramel latte, because you really get the brown sugars come across as being more sort of caramelly and almost kind of like McVitie's digestive biscuity like, and I think that is because of the lactose. So maybe this beer comes across in a sense like a caramel latte. You know, let me know if you guys have tried this one and you're into your different types of coffee servings and things like that, because it's something that I'm a little bit I don't really know a lot about, to be honest. I love coffee beans as an adjunct in beer. I just don't drink coffee. Strange, something that I never did, and I don't really intend to start, because it could be another bad habit maybe. But yeah, it'd probably send me to the roof if I actually started drinking coffee, just because I'm not used to it. But yeah, the aroma out of this beer and the malty side of things is very, very nice. You get a bit of everything. You do definitely get the molasses in there, but I think it comes across as a little bit more like a caramel, kind of a slightly drier, and you can definitely tell that the sugars in this one come across as very kind of caramelised, if you like. And obviously the thing with molasses is basically, you know, just highly caramelised sugar. They heat it up and just make the sugar molecules stick together a bit more. Yeah, the aroma out of this beer, you've got the milk, you've got the coffee beans in there, you've also got the kind of the molasses part in there, and then you've got that lovely what I suspect is being carafa malt in there too. You might get a few kind of dry, powdery, chocolatey notes out of this one. You know, like when you put your nose into the Nesquik powder jar or something like that, it really smells a little bit like that. But yeah, the aroma that comes out of this beer, I think, is really very, very nice. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things, then there's definitely a little bit of earthiness to this one. You do pick up one or two little bits of floral character, and there's also a good little touch of a kind of grassy thing with this beer as well, but there's quite a bit of fruitiness. I would be curious to know what hop they've used in this. Maybe if they're saying it's an English style beer, I would think that maybe they could have used Bramling's Cross, but in fairness, the earthiness that you get out of this one, I don't think it's harsh enough for an English hop. Could it be Summit, or maybe a little bit of Williamette or something like that? Eureka would be the other one to give you some of these red fruity notes, or maybe, you know, at a push, it could perhaps be Northern Brewer from Germany, actually, which is really popular in Doppelbox. So that's an interesting one, but I think the floral and grassy notes are a bit different. I don't think it's Northern Brewer. Would be curious to know that actually. I think it could be Summit or Williamette that's in this. Yeah, there's a few other options as well, but none of them are coming into my mind at the moment. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is quite nice. You do get a little bit of that kind of blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing to the beer, but there's a bit of a figgy quality and maybe a wee bit of a kind of sharper, plummy raisin note as well. The aroma of this beer, I think, is actually quite complex. For a 6.5%er, the aroma of this one is pretty damn complex. So make sure you take a little bit of time to appreciate that before you taste the beer. But that's what we're going to do now. So let's have a taste of this one. This one is the Ammestout, the nursing stout at 6.5% ABV, a milk stout with coffee and molasses from Beer here in Tejn on the Danish island of Bornholm, right in the middle of the Baltic Sea. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange school, and lovely to have these guys back on the channel again. Cheers. Yeah, I'll tell you something, that beer is a very, very slick and quite silky stout, I have to say. The mouthfeel of this one is really nice. That's the first thing that strikes me about this beer actually. Yeah. And I'm wondering about the malt base now. I'm wondering because the malt base actually has a real dryness to it. This beer's got quite a bit more dryness and bitterness in the malt base than the aroma was having me believe. Could there be a wee bit of special B in here along with some carafa? Could have even been wrong about carafa being in there from the flavour. Just kind of shows you need to hold your guns and just try the beer first before you start thinking about these things. Note to self. But yeah, that is a solid beer. I'm going to say straight away to Beer here again, thumbs up. Trying this just makes me even more annoyed at myself for not being able to find these beers. But yeah, where to start with this one then? So yeah, straight away with this beer you get that nice solid roasty toasty black malty backbone there. I do suspect that I think there might be a bit of special B in here, but I think there could also be a little bit of one of the different German carafas as well, because you get a bit of that more kind of harsh roasty toasty kind of black malty note right in the middle of the palate. But then as you move kind of further out to the sides and then further back, you do get a bit more of a kind of smoothness to that kind of toasty, well-fired side of thing. Sitting on top of that, you get a nice little bit of a kind of brown bready sort of note to it. You do get a little bit of that almost slightly Germany rye bread sort of thing, although it's not quite as sweet as German rye bread, to be honest. And if it's an English style beer, to be honest, you wouldn't really expect that. You would expect more of a kind of wholemeal bread. So maybe that descriptor is a little bit more accurate. If you go to the front corners of your palate and then diagonally back, you will feel that there's one or two very slightly woody elements kind of coming out of this one. There's maybe one or two tiny little nutty qualities to the beer as well, a few little nutty undertones. But yeah, that is the backbone of the beer. That's the backbone to this beer. So let's focus on the other parts of it now. So yeah, the coffee side of the beer. For me, if you go towards that back third of your palate, the coffee smoothness that you have out of this is really nice, and it actually comes across, the earthiness that you get out of this one, I think, is actually quite dark, and the kind of roastiness of the coffee, it comes across as a lot more of a kind of stronger roast than the aroma was having me believe. But sitting on top of that kind of bready note, if you move into the kind of middle third of your palate, you can feel the kind of brown sugary notes there. The molasses is just giving you a kind of sheet of a sort of slightly sweet brown sugary character in there, and I think the lactose kind of sits on top of that and just smoothens it out a little bit. So the middle third of your palate is actually very, very smooth and quite slick, whereas if you go to the back third of your palate, you start to get more of the kind of graininess and bitterness out of the beer. But the coffee kind of sits on top of that. So in the middle third of your palate, as I say, you've got the black malts, the bread crust, the brown bread, then you've got the sort of the molasses layer, then you've got the lactose sitting on top of it. But in the back of the palate, you've got the same. But the coffee, I think, kind of sits a bit further up almost and just pushes its way on top of the kind of lactosey notes there. But the coffee side, let's try and pick out some of the individual components of the coffee bean. But yeah, the coffee bean in this one, it does have a wee bit of a more roasty and well-fired element to it, but at the same time, the further you progress into the aftertaste, it does smoothen out a little bit. I get a wee bit of aromaticity from it as well, which is quite interesting because I didn't pick that up in the aroma from the coffee. There is a wee bit of aromaticity. If you go to the very centre of your tongue and just go back and back and back towards the back third of your palate, I think there is a wee bit of an aromaticity coming off the coffee there. But yeah, the bitterness on that back third of the palate really starts to push its way out more the further that you go into the aftertaste, but you still got a real smoothness sitting there in the middle of your palate. So it's an interesting dynamic, this one. You've really got two different sides to this beer. In the back third of your palate, you've got the really roasty, toasty, bitter side of things, whereas in the middle of your palate, you've got that very smooth, silky, and slightly sweet side to the beer as well. I think the middle of your palate, you do start to get a wee bit more of the brown sugar coming out of this one the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, that's a really interesting point to make about this beer. So yeah, I really like how this goes together. Yeah, gets a big thumbs up from me on the malty side of things. So yeah, quite impressed with this one, I have to say. And none of the flavours really kind of dominate. It's just it's one of these beers where everything fits together quite well, and it gives you a bit of balance actually. But it is quite different to what I expected from the aroma. Let's say that. On the hoppy side of things, then, back corners of the palate, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further along the side of the palate, the earthiness gradually fades away, and you start to get a wee bit of floral aromaticity out of this one. Yeah, you do get a nice little bit of that floral aromaticity on the front corners of the palate. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, the beer is just a little bit lighter and grassy. And in fairness, I actually do get a little bit of zestiness off the grassiness in this one. That makes me think it could be an American hop that's in here. As I said, maybe Summit or Williamette or something like that. But yeah, the grassy, the green side of this beer is quite interesting because, as I say, you do get just a little bit of zestiness out of the front palate there. But I dare say if you did let this beer sit for a little bit longer, I'm guessing it's been in the bottle maybe about 6 months. I'm guessing that probably what they've done with this beer is give it a 3-year life. It doesn't say when it was bottled, but yeah, as I said, 14th of the sorry, maybe telling you lies. It could have been in the bottle since January if it's the 14th of the 1st, 23. So this beer might have actually been in the bottle about 11 months. So it's interesting that I'm still getting a wee bit of zestiness off the kind of front edge of this beer. That's definitely an interesting point about this one for sure. So yeah, the green side of this beer is quite interesting and not what I would expect from a beer that's been in its bottle for 11 months. So yeah, the fruity side of things then, as I always say, on the front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just push their way out of the beer. So when you take this beer in, you do get quite a little bit of a fruity, kind of juicy sort of thing out of this one. It's maybe a little bit plummy, to be honest with you, but it's quite like a wet figgy character you get as well. I wouldn't say this beer has raisiny sharpness. It does have more of a kind of juicy, slightly plummy sort of thing. So yeah, a bit of a plum at the back of that front third of your palate, and as you move further forward it becomes a lighter kind of figgy note, and then on the tip of the palate you do get a little bit more of a kind of blackcurranty sort of thing. Yeah, you do almost just get a wee touch of that raisiny sharpness right on the tip of the palate, but that dissipates quite quickly and the beer starts to lean towards a more kind of wet, figgy sort of thing. But you can feel gradually underneath that front third of the palate you start to get more roasty, toasty and kind of smooth, earthy qualities coming out of this beer. So I mean, it's quite interesting in that sense as well. I really like how this beer, just everything fits together actually. In some ways it's a little bit surprising, like the grassy and green side of things and the way that the fruits come out. The fruits are a little bit different in this, but the way that the malt base is done is really quite nice. But again, as I say, I don't get to review that many lower alcohol stouts, so this one was a really nice change of pace and it's kept my interest. After 2,500 reviews, that's what you want. So sorry about the edit there guys, memory card being a pain again. But yeah, let's move on to the mouthfeel section of this video. As I was saying, this beer's thrown up some really interesting food for thought actually. But mouthfeel wise, I would describe this beer as kind of straight up mid-bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. The beer does have a degree of slickness to it, which I think is really quite nice. It really almost comes across as a little bit more porter-like in some ways because of the molasses, I think. That molasses really gives it that more kind of silkiness rather than the bigger maybe creaminess that you would expect of a stout, or indeed the more kind of bitterness. So if I was blind tasting this beer, I would probably wonder if this was some kind of porter, to be honest with you. I will say that about it just because of the slickness that it has. Yeah, it's nice regardless. I mean, it's the porter and the stout are not a million miles away from each other, so that's fair enough. But in terms of the bitterness out of this beer, I'd be tempted to say that this beer has at least 70 IBUs, maybe even a bit more than that, because it's got a good bit of bitterness from the coffee and from the hoppy side of things. But you do have a nice big kind of floral aromatic note in there as well. That's also contributing to the bitterness. So yeah, 70 IBUs for this one. Malt base, like I said, it's really interesting. It's got a lovely roasty toastiness to it, a bit of smoothness, and also a degree of kind of sweetness and slickness. The malt base is really diverse in this one, and it does get a wee bit sweeter the further that you go into the aftertaste. The fruits for me come across as being a little bit more wet, but a little bit juicy as well. So yeah, overall I think it's just fair to say that this is a very, very kind of quirky beer, but as I said, the kind of elephant in the room here is that I don't get to review all that many low alcohol stouts, so this one, compared to some of these big 10% beasts and things that I've been reviewing recently, will obviously be a little bit of a shock to the system in that sense. But yeah, it's definitely nice to do something a little bit different. As I say, after 2,500 reviews, you do want things that are going to make you think a little bit, and this one certainly has. That's why I like Beer Here. They've always got some really quirky things going on in their beer. So yeah, I think we can round off the review there. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. As always, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Beer Here. As I said, hopefully we can return to these guys again quite soon. I need to find somewhere in Copenhagen that stocks the beers regularly, and hopefully I can review a good few other ones for you over the next little while, because I've always enjoyed this brewery, as I said. But yeah, this one was the Ammestout, a 6.5% milk stout with coffee and molasses added to it, from Beer Here in Tejn on the Danish island of Bornholm, right in the middle of the Baltic Sea. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Beer Here if you can, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, thank you for watching, and do make sure you check out Beer Here, like I said. Skål.